neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in the neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
Hello, neighbors. It is a good day in the neighborhood. No. It is a great day in the neighborhood. No, wait. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And it's also a hot one, so I'm not going to wear this the entire time while I'm speaking. It is great to be with you today. If we haven't met before, hope I didn't trick you. I'm not Mr. Rogers. My name is Matt. I'm the pastor here, and it's summertime. We're going to have a little fun, and I get to speak live with you today. We don't always speak live. We have one teaching, one vision that comes from one streamed service, and that's to keep us all on the same mission, the same page. But every once in a while, about 6 to 8 times a year, we, community pastors, get to speak live to our community about something that's burning on our hearts. So I'm excited. I'm excited to welcome you here today, and if you're watching online, thanks for joining us as well. Would love to have you come stop by the building sometime. Today we're talking about neighboring, the art of neighboring, specifically how to love our neighbor well. This is something that I feel like I have been learning a bit about, and it's something that all of us can grow in. And the reality is our culture is actually not too good at it. Front porches are getting smaller and smaller. Back privacy fences are getting taller and taller. We need to learn how to love our neighbors well. And you know who is really, really good at this? This guy. That's right. Fred Rogers. Who wore it better? Definitely Fred Rogers, rocking the cardigan. Fred Rogers, why do we love him? Why did some of us get momentary allergies when we watched that trailer? Yeah, it's because he knew how to love so well. Something sparks in us when we see that sort of affection for others that we want for ourselves. And so, Mr. Rogers is great, and he's much better used for just teaching us our left from our right. He actually has some pretty profound quotes. Listen to one that I found in an interview with Fred Rogers, and he gave his definition of love. Love isn't a state of perfect caring. It is an active noun, like struggle. To love someone is to strive to accept that person exactly the way he or she is, right here and now. This applies to us, and it applies to the way that we love our neighbors. As it turns out, his definition is actually based on this pretty massive command that this other guy mentioned. We talk about him around here from time to time. Jesus. Yes, Jesus. Listen to what Jesus says in Mark 12, 30 to 31. The most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as you love yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. There is no greater commandment. Right up there with love God with all your heart is, and love your neighbor. How? As you love yourself. In other words, when we love our neighbors, we're repeating the actions that we would want someone to do for us. How do you receive love? That's what Jesus is calling to love our neighbors well. Mr. Rogers is saying it. Jesus is saying it. There might be something here that could make up a message on the weekend. So unfortunately, many of us settle for false versions of this, don't we? I know I do from time to time. We focus on, I want to make sure I'm not being a bad neighbor. And so we kind of fixate on that versus how do I love my neighbors really well? So we tell ourselves things all the time, trying to make ourselves better about not being bad neighbors. We say things like, I mean, my dog has taken a dump in your yard a number of times, but it's not that big of turds, I'm pretty good neighbor, pretty good neighbor. What about this one? Hey, yeah, I know Christmas was like 3 months ago, but these are festive winter lights. And that happened to be shaped like icicles. And the fat man in the red suit, yeah, don't worry about him. We're going to get it all taken down by Labor Day. No, you're not. We always tell ourselves these things to try to make ourselves feel better, but we're actually missing the mark on loving our neighbors well. So the question is, are we loving our neighbors well? The person to the left of our house and the person to the right of our house. Are we loving them well? We can tell by our actions. I want to tell you about the time that bacon changed lives and a neighborhood. The year was 2012. My wife and I had just bought a house in Norwood. We were working out of Crossroads, Oakley at that point. And so, Hyde Park location, Norwood prices. It worked out pretty well for me. And I'm from the west side, grew up right down the road. Katie's from Louisville, whole other country practically. So, this Norwood is Norwood. Norwood is Norwood. Let's put it that way, right? I can come home on the west side, and I pass 5 different neighbors that are sitting out in their driveways with camping chairs like we were at the beginning of service, just hanging out. And like in Norwood, you never saw one person, and the people that you did see, you didn't want to see. You know what I'm saying? So in Norwood, we were really trying to intentionally get to know the people around us because it just didn't come naturally like it does in places like this. And so one of the ways that we tried to reach out into our neighborhood was we had breakfast. We had a neighborhood breakfast. We lived on Drex Avenue, so we called it Drexfest. And my wife and I sort of looked at our calendar and said, well, we already do family breakfast on Saturday mornings where we make bacon and eggs. What if we just, invited some of the neighbors in while we were out walking? And I don't know, it's only weird if you make it weird, right? People love bacon, so maybe free bacon is enticing. So we opened it up. We invited some friends that lived down the street, and they came. And they had a really good time. And then they told their friends, and their friends told their friends, and their friends told their friends. And you see where I'm going with this. Suddenly on Saturday morning, we had 70 people coming into our house every single weekend. Yeah, I think you see and this isn't a big house either. I mean, we were itty-bitty living space, right? And so we just had this vision for getting to know the people around us by offering something up, utilizing some of our resources, showing them love, right? The way that we would want to receive love. And so they started coming, and they enjoyed it, and we got to know our neighbors, and we broke bread together, or bacon together, and we actually intermingled our lives. It was the vision that God had given us for our neighborhood. And so through that, God grew us. God grew us in amazing ways. Here are just a couple of things that I was thinking about, how God used this experience to teach us. Our house wasn't too small. That was a lie that we heard over and over again. There's no way. Hey, people are uncomfortable. Your house is too teeny. They're not going to be able to fit. It's going to be... Our house wasn't too small. Now, we had a lot of people in the house, and if it was bigger, that might have been a little easier, but the people that came over actually loved how close it forced everyone to be. We actually got to talk to one another because we weren't spread out in different rooms. Sorry, introverts, you would have hated it. We actually had like a little introvert corner over in the corner where they would all huddle. I think we found one of them down in the basement a couple days later, but that's fine. And so we would open up our home even though it was small. Here's the other thing that it taught us. Our lives weren't too messy. I don't know if you're like us. Our house is not a museum. It is well lived in, especially at this point. I think we had 2 kids under the age of 2. There's spaghetti and unknown substances all over the place. And we felt like, at first, oh gosh, we got to clean everything. I'm stressed out because I want my house to be Pinterest perfect, you know what I'm saying? And it would just cause stress, and we wouldn't want to open up our house until we got feedbacks from some friends that said, hey, you know what? It makes it feel like home. It makes it feel lived in. It's fine. It's fine. Guess what? You might have dirty dishes. You might have some laundry sitting out. It's okay. Our house and our lives weren't too messy. And the amazing thing about this actually was it worked out pretty sweet for us because we'd invite our friends in and they would all pitch in. This was shared community, shared vulnerability, shared sacrifice. So after everyone left, guess what? They had swept and mopped and wiped down the countertops and taken out the trash. This is working pretty well. Who wants bacon tomorrow morning? Come on, stop by. So this was something that God was teaching us, that our lives weren't too messy. And finally, we were never actually too busy. I'm sure you get this all the time when you're trying to make plans. You're thinking, oh my gosh, Jake has his soccer on Tuesday, and then Meredith is going to do ballet on Sunday, so then we're going to have to, there's no possible way. And I'm sure if you've tried to make plans with your friends, it's not easy. Like, maybe pencil it in for 2025. We'll see if we can work out then. But we found that when we actually scheduled it, again, our calendars were never perfect whatsoever. But when we actually scheduled it and made it a priority, like we make everything else a priority that's important to us, dentist visits, doctor visits, sport events, when we scheduled it, then it just happened. It happened, and slowly but surely, God sorted through our schedule. The cool thing for us as parents is our kids are learning from this. Our kids are watching us interact with our neighbors that look very different than us. We love having diversity in our home. Our neighbors our kids are learning that our home isn't meant to just hide away in. It's meant to bless others and have community in. We knew this was working well because when we left Norwood, it was heartbreaking. We made amazing friends, and it didn't stop. Just because we left, Drexfus didn't stop. We actually had friends take the idea, 3 different groups of them, and run with their own version of it. Breakfast one morning, they had a movie night, and then there's another group that did a game night because they wanted to meet their neighbors, use their resources, and love them the way that they would want to be loved. Now that experience shaped the way that we went about building the house that we live in now. So we moved in with my parents. My wife had a VA loan and a bill, and there was sort of a discount for being in the military, and so we got to build our house, and we got to sort of think through where we wanted to live, and we wanted to live in the areas where there was community, where people were actually outside playing. So we looked for strategic places, and we actually got to design our home. So we designed it with a big front porch. We designed it with a big great room in the middle for small groups and inviting people in. And right now, and some of you might have helped with this, we're building a back deck. And it's a big back deck so that we can actually be where our neighbors are. We prayed over our neighbors before we even knew who they were. Didn't see them, didn't know their name. We just asked for God to send the right people at the right time and the right place. And wouldn't you know it? He did. He did. We have neighbors that we love, neighbors that I remember when the guy moved in right next to us, Tom Miller. He moved in, and one morning, I didn't know this, but he had taken his snowblower, and he had just gone down our sidewalk, up our driveway, and that totally blessed us. I think it was one morning that I was coming here for church on Sunday. I was like, I don't know that I'm going to get out of my driveway, but he blessed us in that way. Our neighbors watch our kids. Their kids play with our kids. And mow our grass. One of my neighbors mowed our grass when we were coming back from South Africa for a mission trip. We have every Thursday an event called Thirsty Thursday. Yes, God bless Thirsty Thursday and the West Side. I seem to get very parched whenever Thursday rolls around. So our neighbors sit outside and our kids are hanging out, and we actually get to talk about life together, getting to know one another. Here recently, we had too much straw down on our grass from when we reseeded, and so I'm out there sort of scraping away thinking, this is going to take hours, days maybe. And then I think my wife said, why don't you ask the neighbors and see if they'd help? And so, okay. And guess what? They showed up. We had 5 neighbors hanging out there, and we got to talk while we were doing it. And God had just used our neighbors to bless us and is doing the same through us. Now, you might be saying to yourself, okay, well, that's great, Matt. You have awesome neighbors who are easy to love. You don't know my neighbors, right? You're right, I don't know your neighbors, but here is what I do know. So what do you do when your neighbor is a jerk? Love them. Yeah, I heard some of you say that. Love them. What happens if your neighbor is hard to love and doesn't return that love? Love them. Oh, here's one. What happens when your neighbor has different religious views, or voted differently than you, or has a different sexual orientation? We judge them harshly. Yeah, you're right. No, we love them. We love them, love them, love them. If you read back in Mark 12, Jesus doesn't give us this loophole that says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, but only if they're actually lovable. No, it says to love them as you love yourself. So I want to leave you with a few quick tips for how to love your neighbors well. Everything, in reality, everything you need to know about this, you probably saw in an episode of Mr. Rogers. And truthfully, Jesus is teaching the exact same thing to his disciples when he's showing them what true love looks like. So here it is. A good neighbor shares. Sharing is caring. A good neighbor shares. How have you shared with your neighbor recently? What resources do you have that could be shareable? Is it a power tool that they might need? Is it when you see their lawnmower broken down, rather than watching them tow it away to get fixed, do you lend them your lawnmower, which probably works well? Is it a stick of butter? I know sometimes when we're getting ready to go to Kroger, I'll just shoot our neighbors a quick text saying, hey, do you need anything? And 9 times out of 10, they say, no, we're good. How do you share with your neighbors? One of the things my wife and I do whenever we go out and we buy drinks or we buy food for the grill, we always grab some extra. We grab extra because we're hoping that maybe one of our neighbors would smell what we're cooking and come on over. Maybe one of our neighbors we could get to know because we'd have a free meal for them. What, cost $1 for a burger or something like that? And if they don't come over, then you got some extra food for next time. We think strategically about how to share with our neighbors. What about your time? Could you share your time? You see your neighbors moving in. Could you take a moment to stop what you're doing and just walk over and see if they need a hand? Here's a crazy one. I know I could get kicked out of here for saying this, but what if you spent some time just coming over and not asking for something, right? People just automatically assume when they see you walking in their direction, they like run inside, close the door, bar the door, close the blinds and turn the lights off. What if you had no agenda, just wanting to say hello and get to know them? Here's a litmus test for you. Get to know their names. Do you know your neighbors' names? The ones to your left, the ones to your right. Bonus if you know the ones across from you and the ones behind you. This is an extra bonus point, but do you know their kids' names? What if you spent some time just getting to know them? That speaks volumes to people. And prayer. You can share in your prayer life. Pray for them. If you see them, say, hey, what's one thing I can be praying for you about? Here's one thing I did learn. If you say, hey, would you like some prayer? The answer is always no. Their life could be in shambles, and the answer is, oh, thank you, we're good. If you say, hey, what's one thing I can be praying for you about? Then that cues them up, I'm going to give you something. I've always gotten a response from them when I ask if I can pray for them. A good neighbor shares. A good neighbor also invites. A good neighbor invites. It doesn't just mean inviting to church, but when's the last time you invited a neighbor into your life? Into your mess. Like we were talking about before, I know none of our houses are Pinterest perfect. Probably never gonna be. And the moment that they are, they're just quickly about to be destroyed by toddlers. That's just how it works. There are other neighbors that come in. That's just how it works. But when's the last time you invited a neighbor into your mess? What about your birthday parties or Halloween parties, small groups? These things that we do rhythmically throughout the year are great opportunities to just say, hey, we're doing a thing. You want to come on over? Maybe their kids play with your kid. It's a great opportunity to bring them over to a birthday party. And church. Don't want to forget that one, right? And when's the last time you invited a neighbor to church? Now, be careful on this one because you don't want to be the pushy, awkward, weird neighbor that just constantly is banging that drum. Church, you come to church. Hey, I'm coming to church. You're doing church again. You want to go to church? Go to church is good. You want to make sure that you're being friendly. You can invite them to church, but guess what? The answer might be no. I've gotten rejected 90% of the time for invites to church, and I'm a pastor. I got some ideas for how to bring people in, but the reality is they don't know why. But what if you are the only person in their life who has a healthy relationship with God? What if you're the only person in their life whose marriage is actually thriving? What if you're the only person in their life that has a good relationship with your kids? Maybe they see a little bit of that goodness and they want some of it. Maybe they don't want to go to church, but they'd be willing to help you fill a Thanksgiving food drive box. They'd be willing to help out with Go Local, doing these tangible things that instead of coming to the church, they are being the church. When's the last time you invited? A good neighbor shares, a good neighbor invites, and finally, a good neighbor asks. Be inquisitive. Ask questions. Continue the conversation is one of my biggest pet peeves. People that do not continue the conversation by reciprocating with questions. Say something like, hey man, how's it going? Oh, good. Okay, well, bye. Ask questions. Continue the conversation. Oh, I'm good, man. How you been? And ask specific questions. Here's the thing. I've found that when I ask questions, if I just say, how's it going? What's the answer? Good. It's always good. It's always good. So ask specific questions. Hey, man, how's your new job going? Do you know your neighbor's hobbies? Do you know their interests? You can ask specific questions about that. And here's another little pro tip for you. Remember something they said so you can circle back around to it later. So I just had a conversation with my neighbor the other day, and I remember that he was getting ready to start a new job. So when I walked up to him, I did say, hey, how's it going? He said, good, you? I said, good. That would have been the end of the conversation, but I remembered, oh, hey, how's the new job? And that got us into a much deeper spot. Remember, Jesus is saying, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that means, what are the things that you would like? You like when people ask questions. You like when people are inquisitive and want to know a little bit more about your life. Show that same love to your neighbors. Let's just assume that where you are is not by accident. That the people that God put to your left and put to your right and put across from you and put behind you is on purpose. Are you loving that? Truly loving them well? Our culture says higher fences. Jesus calls us into deeper friendships. Our culture says just keep to yourselves. Just keep it all to yourselves. Jesus says pray for one another. Our culture says your home is only your personal refuge, your little place to sneak away, no one's allowed in. Jesus tells us that it's a resource that blesses others. Our culture says that relationships should be shallow, but Jesus calls us to share our lives with each other. We're called to love our neighbors. That starts with you, it starts with me, and it starts with the people to the left and right of us. So, Westside, how will you love your neighbors well today? Let me pray for us. God, I pray that right now you would bring our neighbors into our mind, specifically the ones that might be difficult to love, the ones that we don't really know well. God, I pray you would bring those into our mind and that you would show us a tangible way of showing them what your love looks like for us. God, I believe when that happens, you will change our lives. You'll change the West Side all through neighborhoods. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Thanks, West Side.